A picnic is not complete without a picnic blanket. Welcome to Professor Pincushion. I'm Tove, and I'm here to show you how to make a simple picnic blanket tote. Carrying everything you need for the day at the park isn't easy, but our picnic blanket project is a must-make. Not only is it a practical blanket, but it quickly folds up into an easy-to-carry tote. Interested to see how it's all done? Let's go ahead and get started. I'm using these supplies for creating the picnic blanket. I have 2 yards of fleece. I'm using 58-inch width. That should be enough for the main blanket and for the flap. 1/4 yard of hook and loop fastener, and then 1/3 of a yard or 12 inches of 1-inch wide webbing for the strap. You need a fabric marker or chalk, sewing gauge, pencil for creating the pattern. I also have some pattern paper here, but you don't need that. You can just use regular paper, and then also a ruler for doing the pattern. A 9-inch length zipper, 3 packages of extra wide double folded bias tape. Of course, I'm going to be using my sewing machine, all-purpose thread, straight pins, and my fabric scissors. The only pattern piece you need to make is going to be the flap of your picnic blanket. You can see I already drew up my pattern. It's actually quite easy to make. First, draw a rectangle that's 5.5 by 11.5. So you just have your rectangle. And then on one corner, from the corner, go down 2 inches here, make a mark, 2 inches here, make a mark, and then just draw a smooth curve. I just kind of eyeball this. Once you have your curve, you can go ahead and erase these lines over here, and that's going to be your pattern piece. You can go ahead and put cut 2, because you're going to cut 2 out of your fleece, and then one side, so the opposite side of the curved side is going to be the side that you're going to place on the fold. Before I cut out my 2 flap pieces, I like to cut out my main blanket piece first. So it's just 55 inches by 55 inches. It's a big square. If you have a rotary cutter and a mat, it definitely makes it a lot easier, but it's definitely not necessary. You can cut it out with your scissors. So just take your 2 yards and cut out a piece that's 55 by 55. Take one of your flaps, lay it on the table right side up if there's an obvious right side, and you're going to mark the center of the top curve section. So you see it's curving up here, so I just marked the center with my fabric marker. Then I'm going to take 9 inches, which is 1/4 yard, of one side of the hook and loop. This is actually the rough side, but you can do the other side as well. I also marked the center of the hook and loop. I'm going to place it on the right side of my flap that I'm using here, and it's going to be 1 inch down from the top, and the center lines are matching up. So I'm going to measure down 1 inch here and also do it right here just to make sure that it's level. Then you're going to pin it in place, because next we're going to stitch around the perimeter of our hook and loop. You can see that I'm stitching around the outside perimeter of my hook and loop here. And when I get close to the corner, I'm just going to put my needle down, go ahead and lift the foot, pivot your fabric, put the foot down, and then you can continue sewing. And that's how you can take care of the corners. Next, I need to draw a box for placing my zipper. So I'm from the hook and loop, I'm going to measure down 2 inches and I'm going to draw a line. From this line, I'm going to measure down 3/8 of an inch and I'm going to draw another line. On each side, I'm going to go in 1 3/8, 1 3/8, and draw a line, and you end up with a box. You can just ignore these lines right here because that was an accident. So I have a box for placing where I want my zipper to be on my flap. Now, because this fabric tends to stretch, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to do a basting stitch around the box, and I'm not going to do it directly on the line because I'm going to cut on the line, but I'm just going to do it right past the line and just go around the whole thing. The basting stitch is just going right outside my box. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just basically there to kind of stabilize the area so it doesn't stretch too much when we're putting in our zipper. You just want to use the longest stitch that your machine can do, and you don't need to worry about doing any back stitching. Once the zipper's in, we can go ahead and remove this. Next, I'm going to cut out the fabric that's inside the box. So I'm cutting on my fabric marker line for the box, not where my basting stitch is. You can still see my basting stitch is still intact. I just cut along the fabric line. Once that is cut out, you can go ahead and take your zipper, and it's going to be placed into this box section. Now just to prep my zipper, I just did a quick little light press here with a not very hot iron because this is plastic, so you don't want a chance melting that. Just to make it a little bit more flat. And then here on the end, I just undid my zipper a little bit, brought the ends together and did a couple of tacking stitches with just some all-purpose thread just to kind of hold it together. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to place it right underneath there. So it's coming right in the center of my box here. Once you have it centered, you can go ahead and pin it into place because then you're going to stitch around the perimeter and that'll keep your zipper in. When sewing on a zipper, you may want to switch to a zipper foot just to make it a little bit easier as you're going around. For this one, you're going to do a regular straight stitch and don't forget to do some back stitching. Take your second flap, lay it on the table right side up. Now this time we're going to be measuring from the bottom edge. So this is the curved edge. We're dealing with this edge down here. You're going to measure up 2 inches, and if you need to draw a line, go ahead and draw a line. You're going to take your 12 inches of your webbing, and this tends to fray. So if you want to make sure that the end is not going to fray, you can use some fabric sealant on the end there. And you're going to place it so it's at that line, so 2 inches away from this edge. Now this end should be 1 inch away from this edge, and the same thing over here. So after you line it up, go ahead and just pin the ends into place. 1 inch in from the end of my strap, I'm going to do a box and then do an X right in the center of that box, and that is going to be where I'm doing my stitches for attaching my strap. You can see I already did that on this side, and you just need to do a regular length straight stitch. Take both flaps and place them together wrong side to wrong side. So this is the right side, so I'm laying it on the table right side down, and then I'm taking the one that has my strap and playing it right on top so all the edges match up. So you have the right side of the flaps on each side. I'm going to pin, and I'm going to do a basting stitch. Again, that's the longest length stitch that you have on your machine, and you're going to do it around the whole thing. Next, we'll attach bias tape to this outside curved area. So you don't need to place it here, just here. Take your bias tape, you're just needing one package for now, and you're going to unfold it. So the side where you have the nice seams, that's the right side. This would be the wrong side. You can see the raw edge there. So it goes right side to the edge of your flap, and you can see I'm doing it with the zipper side up. If you do it the other way, it's not going to hurt anything. It's just the way that I prefer. So I'm going to take one side, this raw edge of the bias tape, and I'm going to line it up right here with the edge of the flap, and I'm just going to pin all the way around here. When you get to the curved areas, you may have to put a little bit more pins, but it should be able to be pinned without getting any wrinkles. So once the whole thing is pinned, you're just going to stitch in the first crease mark that you have. Sew in the crease using a regular straight stitch, and don't forget to back stitch. Refold the bias tape so it goes over to the other side. And where you have your stitches from sewing on the bias tape, you want it to cover those stitches. So I'm just going to fold it so it looks like this on one side, and then it looks like this on the other side, and I'm going to pin it all into place because you're going to take it back to your machine and you're going to stitch right along the edge of the bias tape and catch it on the other side as well, and then that's going to stitch it all into place. When sewing down the bias tape, you can just do a regular straight stitch. Don't forget to do some back stitching. You don't want to get too close to the edge, but I would say about 1/8 of an inch away from that edge. Next, we're going to attach our flap to our main blanket piece. So if you have an obvious right side, you're going to lay this right side up, and I've just picked one side. It's 55 by 55, so it's pretty much a square. I'm just designating one side is going to be the top. And you're going to want to mark the center. So if you need to fold your blanket in half to mark it, go ahead and do that. And you're also going to mark the center of your flap as well. I have this up, so I have the zipper side up, and I'm lining up the centers. I'm going to take this, I'm going to fold it over or flip it over. So now it's laying on top of my blanket on the edge. And this raw edge and this raw edge is going to line up so your raw edges are meeting, and you're going to pin and do a seam right across the top. I would just do a 1/2 inch seam allowance for this. Don't forget to backstitch, and you're just doing a regular length straight stitch. Take the bias tape that you have left. You should have 2 full ones and the one that you partially used, and you're going to sew them together end to end because that should be enough to get around the whole blanket, because we're going to finish all the edges. Now we're dealing with fleece, so it doesn't really need to be finished. I just think it looks nicer. I'm going to take one end, and if you want to lightly press it, you can. And you can see I unfolded it this way. So this is the right side of it. So I'm going to unfold it. Then I'm going to take my next one from my other package. I'm also going to unfold it. So this is the wrong side, this is the right side. I'm going to place them so they're right side to right side, but that they're perpendicular to each other. So one's going this way, one's going this way. And I'm going to kind of roughly line up the raw edges that I can. You can see it's not perfect here, but I'm just doing the best I can. And I would just throw in a couple of pins, and I'm actually going to put my pins in diagonally this way. Then if you want to draw a line with your fabric marker just to make it easier, you can go ahead and do that, and you're going to draw a line from the end right here, this corner. You're going to draw a diagonal line from this corner to this corner here. So it's going to go like this, and that's where you're going to do your stitching. So you're just doing a regular length straight stitch just like this. So make sure you do it in the correct direction. If you lay it like this, you need to stitch this way, not this way. Otherwise it won't work out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that part now. After you do your stitch, you can go ahead and trim off the excess seam allowance. So you end up about 1/4 inch. So now when I pull this apart, you can see I end up with a single strip again. So now with the other end, I'm going to sew another piece, which is my third piece. So you should end up with one long strip. Next, we're attaching bias tape around the perimeter of the blanket. And I'm just going to start where my seam allowance is with my flap. I'm keeping my flap on top of the blanket because we're going to enclose all the seam allowance inside the bias tape. So I'm just sort of starting in the middle. Now, I unfolded it so it's right side of the bias tape to my blanket, but just on the end here, I'm just going to fold this about 1/2 inch, and I'm going to start pinning it. And I wouldn't pin it all the way around the blanket, just pin it to your first corner, because we first need to do a mitered corner, and so I'm going to show you how to do that at the sewing machine. I'm stitching in this first crease. Make note on what your seam allowance is. Whatever your seam allowance is, you're going to measure up from the corner, and then I just put a pin just to mark where that is. So when I get to the pin, which I'm getting pretty close right now, I'm going to put my needle down, lift my foot, go ahead and remove that, and then I'm going to rotate my fabric. So now I'm stitching diagonally to that corner. So you were doing a straight stitch and now you're doing a diagonal one. And then once you get to the corner, you can go ahead and cut your threads and take your blanket out of the machine. This is that same corner. I'm going to take this bias tape, and I'm taking it with my left hand, and I'm bringing it up and rotating it. So now it's going in the other direction. So this is still lining up with the raw edge here, and we have a folded edge here that's lining up with this edge. The more precise you are, the neater it's going to look. So then I could go ahead and start doing pins and continue sewing in this crease going in this direction. And you would start sewing from this edge and just continue on. So just to show you again real fast, it's laying flat, I lift it up, rotate it, kind of folds in on itself, and now I can go ahead and pin it and sew it. So you're going to repeat this every single time you get to a corner. Once you come back all the way around again, so this is where I started, this is where I'm finishing up, all you need to do is just overlap this other end with the beginning, I'd say about 1/2 inch, and just lay it on top like that, and then you can continue sewing, and don't forget to back stitch here. Now we can refold our bias tape, and you can see all the seam allowance here from the flap is going to be enclosed in that bias tape, and you want to make sure that you're covering up your stitches on the other side so we don't see that. You can then pin it, and you can start sewing right along the edge on the bias tape. Let's talk about what to do in the corners. So if I was to unfold this, you can see that I'm ending up with a mitered corner on this side, but what do we do on the back? So I'm just going to start folding it on the edges here and pinning it into place. And I'll do this one as well. And you can see it just kind of sticks up like this. So I'm going to basically fold one side at a time when doing a corner. So I'm going this way. You can see all the folded edges going in one direction, and then I can bring this back in this direction. So if you fool with it a little bit, you end up with a nice corner on this side and a nice corner on this side as well. So once I have it folded like I want it, then you can go ahead and just stitch it down into place. The last thing we need to do is the other hook and loop placement. So to do that, we're going to fold up our blanket just as we would if we were going to put it in the tote form. I'm going to take each end, and you can see my blanket is just lying flat and the flap is sticking out. So I'm going to take this side and I'm going to fold it to this edge of this bias tape here of the flap. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side as well. So just fold it like this, and then do the same thing on this side. Then take each side and you're going to take them and you're going to fold them into the center. So I can do this side first, and then I can fold the side on top of it. The picnic blanket should look like a lawn strip. I just rotate it so it'll be a little bit easier to show you this next step. I'm going to take the end of my blanket and I'm going to fold it to the bottom of the flap. And then I'm just going to take this folded edge and fold it again. So that's how you can fold it, and now I can just bring the flap like this. Now we can do the placement for the second hook and loop. So this is the soft side. All I'm going to do is just carefully lift this up, and that kind of gives me the placement on where I want to put it. So you can either mark it with your fabric marker, or you can just pin it with straight pins. You just have to be careful because obviously when you're sewing it, you only want to sew through a single layer of blanket. And if you're pinning it like this, you may actually go through more than one layer. So here's one that I already finished. So this one is actually stitched into place, and you just go around the perimeter like you did with the one up here. As an option, at each corner you can add an eyelet. So this is a small eyelet that I can just stake my blanket down if it happens to be a particularly windy day, and you can just use little golf tees or something like that. We have tutorials on how to insert metal eyelets or doing an embroidered eyelet like this as a nice accent. Here is the completed picnic blanket. It's nice and compact, and it has an easy to carry handle here. Flip it over. We have our bias tape as an accent. You can open it up. Now the whole flap here is a pocket because we added the zipper. So you can add your golf tee stakes, you can add your keys, whatever you need to bring with you, and you have a handy picnic blanket for your next outing. We hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please subscribe to get notified of our weekly releases. Also check out ProfessorPincushion.com to view our complete library with well over 350 sewing tutorials. If you would like to directly support us, you can check out our Patreon campaign and earn some exclusive perks. Thanks for watching.